all of my favorite literary characters are white. How the fuck did that happen? So I was working on one of my top 10 lists, kind of as like a reintroduction to the channel and like talking about my favorite literary characters. And as this list begins to grow, I all of a sudden realized that every single fucking one of these people is white. What the hell? I'm supposed to know better. I'm supposed to be enlightened in this, you know, I know race and I read many amazing authors of color. So how did none of those characters from all of those great works not make it onto my list? Just to say this list was not based on which I think are the greatest literary characters of all time, because if so, there would definitely be a lot of different changes to it, but just my own personal favorites. The explanation that I thought of when I was looking at this is that for the most part, I would say about 80% of the characters on my list, they had a head start. For the most part, every single character on this list is a character that I've grown up with since I've been a reader. And I've been reading actively, you know, not just being read to, since I was about 5-6 years old. I've read a majority amount of white novelists, and I've read a lot of classics because I'm an English major. And as a result, most of the characters that I've been exposed to in literature through academia or through being recommended to by other literary people are white. And that freaks me out. Television, and then I decided to look at my other list, like movies and television and other film genres have fared better. You know, there are definitely a lot of characters that I love that are of different racial backgrounds, and because I think that visual medium also really helps. So I was really drawn to other characters of color overall. There are still exceptions, you know, I never was a fan of Susie Carmichael from the Rugrats, but in general, you know, like my two favorite characters I think on TV of all time are like on a very weird spectrum, but it's Xena and Angel Colby's Guinevere from BBC More. Like those are two of like my favorite characters of all time. And still though, if I had to put one over the other, Angel Colby like means so much to me on an emotional fucking level, but Xena has been in my life since I was 8, and I cannot shake that. And I think that tends to a larger problem, is that we mostly consume media that doesn't include us in it. And when we are included, we tend to be tokens or marginalized or not really given the development that we deserve. And so we end up with characters that we may root for, we may want to be better, we may care about, but they're not our favorites in that same way because they're not allowed to be fully fleshed out characters. Like for example on True Blood, I fucking love Tara, but I wouldn't say she's my favorite character on the show. We're not allowed to shine in our own element, and even though there have been recent examples, you know, with Abby Mills, with Guinevere, with you know, Agent May, with Regina Mills, you know, we're getting more variety. I'm blanking her name from How to Get Away with Murder. Annalise Keating, you know, we're getting more characters of color. But then literature is kind of my most important thing because that's what I know the most. Classic literature is overwhelmingly white at the children's level, because when you're given books to read as a kid, it's like Gulliver's Travels, Secret Garden, Black Beauty, Anne of Green Gables, Little Women. You know, those are the books that you're given as a child. And even when dealing with issues like race, you know, the gateway race book for most people is gonna be To Kill a Mockingbird. But beyond that, you also get to have stories of just people getting to be people. You know, one of my favorite characters is Anne Shirley, and what's so great about her character is how much it's so developed about her as a person and her trying to feature her goals and her accomplishments. It's a great narrative about her. There's no sort of moral underpinning to it. I mean, you can definitely get something out of it, but there's no need to struggle there. Whereas you get something said similar to like To Kill a Mockingbird in that way of like The Watsons Go to Birmingham. That's a really great book, but it's so racialized and so racially heavy that it's not just enjoyable. And I was talking to one of my friends who, she said she liked reading up until she went into middle school, but when she would look at books that were about people that looked like her, they were all what I call struggle novels. They're all novels dealing about race and how to survive being with race. And while that is definitely important, everything that should be involved when you're writing characters of color, when that's all there is for you as a kid, you don't get, there's no black Harry Potter. You know, there's no black Percy Jackson. Even the Kane Chronicles, which are part of the kind of the Percy Jackson universe, aren't as popular as the Percy Jackson, you know, characters. And that what is creates the problem. On the other hand, there are these great works of literature like Beloved, Native Son, Clotel, Iola Leroy, The Color Purple, that you don't really read when you're a kid. I think that the one that I know the most people read is probably The Skin I'm In. But all of these novels are similar. They're about race and dealing with race and bigotry. They're not about fun. They're not about going on adventures. Not in that traditional Western canonical way, which is how we're taught to read literature, unfortunately. And you also, as amazing as Beloved is, and it is amazing, and Toni Morrison is one of the most important living authors today, if not the most important American living author today, but you can't give Beloved to an 8-year-old. At least not the same way you can give them Anne of Green Gables or Harry Potter or any other piece of like traditional children's literature. Even Harry Potter, which deals with race, deals with it in the most hand-waved, wibbly-wobbly way, where there's really no characters of color who deal with the racial issue. All of that's put onto Hermione, who is white, and so those characters get to be your favorite. You grew up with Hermione, you grew up with Sarah Crew, you grew up with Alana, all of those characters in YA and teens and children, and by the time you're an adult and you get exposed to all these great works of literature, you may love them, you may enjoy them, but they don't often get to be your favorites because they don't have that nostalgia of being books that you read time and time again. When I'm sick, when I don't feel well, when I need to be picked up, when I need to be like, feel better, I read A Little Princess, and it's imperialistic as fuck. But that's the novel that I've always had in my life to make me feel positive and make me feel good. And it's so problematic and it's so imperialistic and it's so exoticizing, but that's my favorite novel. That's one of my favorite books ever. And as much as I love Beloved, I could not, and I was looking at all these other characters, I'm like, why did I just put Sethe on this list? And I couldn't kick anyone off. And the other bad thing about it was that of the list of characters that I had compiled, only 2 of them were written by people of color. Edmond Dantes, who's written by Alexander Dumas, who was mixed race, and the author who writes A School for Good and Evil, who is Indian. But his main character that I liked on my list, that was Sophie, she's white. And Edmond Dantes, while I suppose you could read him as non-white, is mostly depicted as white. And that's the other thing too, that there could be characters that you read in children's literature that could not be white. They don't have to be white. There's nothing about them that is completely established in their whiteness. But that's what we default to, and when people deviate from that, there becomes big controversy. I mean, look at the Hunger Games. Look at how people acted with Rue. Look at people acted about the idea of Katniss not being white. You know what I mean? And because Jennifer Lawrence is so good as Katniss, that kind of controversy has sort of like been hand-waved. Like, well, she's great, so she was supposed to be in that role in the first place. But it ignores the fact that there are people who thought Katniss was like indigenous or, you know, mixed race, not blonde, blue-eyed Jennifer Lawrence, and that's completely hand-waved. And I remember as a kid, I thought Hermione was black because she had big hair, and I was like, I have big hair, she has big hair, people call her names, people go, maybe, you know, but then, you know, the movie comes out and those dreams are squashed because they're never gonna choose to go the non-white route when the white route is that much easier. And that also discourages people of color who are younger when you're a child of reading, because why do you want to read books that don't feature you, don't have you in them, and when you do get to read books for them, as good as they may be, they're all about the struggle. And not everyone wants to be about the struggle all the time. However, I think that this is something that's fixable. I mean, we just need to work on exposing younger people to these different literature, to expose them to these complex characters. Maybe not beloved, but there are plenty of writers of color who have been writing for YA, writing for children of all races and ethnicities. It's time for them to get their shine, and we have to be the ones promoting it and being like, oh, you like this? Here's this. And I know We Need Diverse Books has been very huge about doing that. And I just had to make this video because as someone who, you know, supports We Need Diverse Books, who writes diverse stories, who, you know, preaches about diversity all the time on this channel, I felt so hypocritical to think of all my favorite characters in literature that I've loved since I was a young girl, even recently, and none of them were people of color. And when I would go and I would think about it, like I would think about it and be like, oh, who's a person of color I can put on this list? And that's the problem. Like, if I had read the Joy Luck Club when I was a kid, I'm sure that June would be on this list. So, what are some of your favorite non-white literary characters? Let's spread the love around. Let's make our list of these great characters of color. I would love to hear what people have to say. And if you were making up your list, would all your favorite characters be white?